Hello, scholars. This is going to be the video for chapter 4 in week 3. Oh my goodness, we're already at week 3, and we are going to be talking about topic development and gathering supporting materials. This first video is going to be specific to topic development. So per usual, I am going to share my screen so that you guys can see my slides. This should not be a long video, but hopefully you'll get something from it. All right, so chapter 4, developing your purpose and topic. So when you get ready to do your outline, as noted in your outline template, there are 3 things that I would like to see prior to your actual introduction statement. So the first of these is your general purpose. Your second is going to be your specific purpose. And your third is going to be your central idea, which some also refer to as a thesis statement. So there are only 3 options for your general purpose. So this could be pretty easy. The first is to inform. Now, when you're informing your audience, when your general purpose is to inform, essentially, you want to teach something, you want to demonstrate something, you want to define something or describe something. So your overarching goal is typically to teach, but we label that to inform. In teaching this thing, you're describing, defining, or demonstrating, actually. In a presentation whose general purpose is to persuade, you are trying to change and or reinforce attitudes, beliefs, values, sometimes even behaviors that stem from those attitudes, beliefs, and values. A presentation that is geared toward entertaining typically seeks to elicit some type of change in emotion. Typically, you're either trying to entertain them by way of humor or dramatics or something that's going to have some type of emotional stimulus. Now, I will note that sometimes while entertaining, you may also inform and you may also persuade. Typically with special occasion speeches, your general purpose is going to be to entertain. So that may be worth mentioning. All right, brainstorming for possible topics. When you're thinking about your topic, you want to think about who you are, what types of things are you generally interested in, what types of things are you already very familiar with, what type of personal experiences can you bring to the table that will enable you to better discuss this particular topic. So oftentimes people get so tied into the idea that, oh, this is an academic presentation, so I need a whole lot of facts and figures, and I need to make sure that I have all of this peer-reviewed information from these scholars, these experts who are authorities in the field and who are going to strengthen my credibility. Yes, all of that is correct. It would be beneficial to have information that comes directly from experts in the field, but it's also beneficial that you be able to speak based on your personal experiences and provide examples that stem from items that you've actually experienced and you're personally knowledgeable about. And it's easier to talk about things that you've had personal experiences with. It's easy for you to do on the cuff or in the moment audience adaptation if someone looks as if they're not really understanding what you're talking about. If this is something you've actually experienced, it's easy for you to discuss examples, for you to tell stories of what has transpired in your own life that paints a more vivid picture of what you're discussing. It's ideal typically to either talk about something that you already know a whole lot about or something that you're extremely passionate about and that you'd like to learn more about. Either one of those are good ways or good tactics for thinking about topic development. Now, one thing that people may suggest that is discussed in some of the textbooks is clustering. Clustering allows us to pull from a wide range of potential topics to narrow down what we might think we could talk about best for the occasion, for the audience. So we're going to start off simply by brainstorming what ideas could I potentially talk on based on my personal experience, what I am most passionate in, so on and so forth. So what I've done here is I have a list of a few things: people, places, things, processes, ideas. And under each, I put it to the side, but most people would do a list under each one of those categories. Under each category, you would make a list of things that might interest you within that category that you think you could talk about. Celebrities, maybe if you're a Beyonce fan, I know some people are Beyonce fans, and her birthday was recent. So maybe you'd like to talk about a celebrity or multiple celebrities, a group or so, or something like that, and that might interest you. And you might have a wealth of knowledge and be able to talk about those individuals. They don't have to be entertainers as far as singers or dancers or performers. They might be sports individuals. So if you're really into sports and you want to talk about the life and legacy of an athlete that you like and appreciate, you can talk about them. Teachers, I think right now, if I had to do a presentation on teachers, I could easily come up with the three best teachers I've ever had in my life: Carney Smith, James Hawkins, and Dr. Orlando Moss. I could talk about them and I could give details about their lives. I could tell stories about my personal interactions with them. That's something that I could talk about immediately without doing any research. So that might be a beneficial topic for me. If you want to talk about places like your hometown or ideal vacation spots, those things provide avenues by which you could discuss your personal experiences, and you could also pull research to justify why someone else might be interested in that particular topic. Things such as video games and smartphones, they're very popular. Most of you, I imagine, at least have a smartphone. And considering that someone recently won $3 million by playing a video game, I was thinking about getting a video game myself. So I imagine that some of you guys may also have video games and have a wealth of knowledge about how to use those resources and be able to talk about those with ease. Processes such as actions that you can teach someone, that you can demonstrate, you can perform a demonstration speech in terms of how you do a thing. So a good one might be to show us how to cook a dish. And that doesn't mean that you're going to cook the dish during your presentation. You might have little videos, very detailed instructions. There might be a number of teaching resources or presentation aids that you can include to vividly demonstrate exactly how you cook a particular dish. The same is true for changing a tire. And these are skills that are desirable for most people. Most people want to know, I imagine, how to cook at least a few items. And most people think, I can save a lot of money if I'm able to change a tire. I don't have to worry about waiting out in the middle of nowhere for someone to come rescue me. I can just change my own tire. So those are skills that might be beneficial for individuals, and you might be able to share that information with us. Another category that you might use for clustering might be ideas, concepts, those things that aren't necessarily concrete items. They're rather abstract because different people interpret them in different ways. Maybe you want to talk about love. And even though that's an abstract concept, you can talk about it in a way that makes it more concrete. So let's say, for example, if you were to pull from the book on love languages and you wanted to talk about the ways that people typically expect love to be expressed, whether you're a words of affirmations type person or quality time or acts of service type lover, that you might want to talk about that. Also, cognitive dissonance. We experience this all the time when we have two competing notions. We know that this is right, at least to a certain extent, but then this also has a justification for why it might be the better option. So when we go back and forth internally about what we think is good, better, best for ourselves and or others, that's what we call cognitive dissonance. So maybe you'll talk about that. Evaluating and selecting topic ideas. So I just went over a little bit of what I might consider tactics or steps for considering multiple ideas, for brainstorming, for coming up with a great extensive list of potential topics. Once you have this big list, now it's time to see which ones would be most ideal for the actual presentation that you have scheduled. Now, we've already talked about considering your personal interests. Beyond that, it's very important that you consider the audience. What type of audience do we have? Do we have a homogeneous audience, meaning that everyone is basically the same, everyone is on the same level in terms of intellect and ability to understand the concepts that you're covering? Or do we have a heterogeneous audience with individuals with different backgrounds, different expectations, different level of intellect? Most of the times we're going to have a heterogeneous audience. So we want to make sure that we are discussing something that is going to be accepted by everyone and understood by everyone. Remember that the major goal of communication, or the definition of communication, is using messages to generate meaning. So if we're not generating meaning or having a certain level of understanding based on our communication, then we haven't effectively communicated. And we always want to communicate effectively, otherwise you're wasting your time. So our goal is to communicate in a way that allows as many, if not all of our audience members to clearly understand what we are trying to get them to understand. Consider your resources that are available. Based on the space, what do I have access to? If I was going to talk about changing a tire, I'm probably not going to have access to a tire and a car that's going to fit in the space that I can actually show them, but I might have access to a smartphone that enables me to record myself changing a tire that I can show clips of that recording that might be beneficial. So a lot of times I say it's not really necessarily the lack of resources, but oftentimes our resourcefulness that keeps us from being able to do what we want to do. But based on the text, be mindful of the resources that you have available and those things that will optimize your ability to clearly generate meaning within your audiences. Also consider time. It might take a little longer than 5 minutes to change a tire. It depends on what type of person you are, what type of vehicle you have, what resources you have available. So in discussing your topics, think about what's going to be an ideal amount of information to cover the topic within whatever time frame you have. I know some of our speeches are 3 to 5 minutes. Some of them are 5 to 7 minutes. Then we have a speech that's 8 to 10 minutes. So there is a range of time frames, and you have to make sure that your topic aligns with the amount of time that you have to present this particular topic. The last thing is to consider the setting and the occasion. Our speeches in this class will be academic based speeches because this is an academic setting. However, I like to open my class up as a platform that's open to any topic, as long as it's presented in a respectful manner. I'll say that. So you guys can talk about pretty much any topic as long as you can present it in a respectful manner. But typically in an academic setting, there will be some topics that you probably want to shy away from. We're going to talk about that a little later on. All right, identifying your specific purpose. Your specific purpose is a mild extension from your general purpose. So it's a single infinitive phrase that states what speakers hope to accomplish. So your specific purpose should say, at the end of my speech, my audience will be informed about. At the end of my speech, my audience should be persuaded to. So it's an extension of your general purpose. you're informing your audience about something that is specific and you want a full statement to do so. Now, the guidelines for a specific purpose include the following. 1, you want a full infinitive phrase. 2, it should be a statement, not a question. 3, you should avoid figurative language. 4, you should limit your specific purpose to one distinct idea. And 5, you should avoid being vague. So I have examples here of what I mean for each one of those. In terms of having a full infinitive phrase, you want a full sentence, basically. You don't want to say, my specific purpose is to inform about avalanches. Now, that would be a full phrase, but it's very vague. What about avalanches? If I don't know anything about avalanches, I might not even know what you're referring to. So don't just do one word specific purposes or just like bullet points. Make sure you have a full statement. So a more effective specific purpose about avalanches might be to inform my audience about the 3 major kinds of avalanches. Make sure that you're not just asking a question. It's a specific purpose. It's like a specific purpose statement would be ideal. I would love to just throw statement at the end of that. Specific purpose statement. Your specific purpose should always be a statement, not a question. Now, I am a question-driven person. Typically, when I'm working on my outlines, I do so by asking questions that need to be answered. This is just how I think. This is how I develop my outlines for writing and speaking. So someone may say that, oh, I want to answer this question with my speech. So my specific purpose is to answer the question, what is Dia de los Muertos? But that's not what I would recommend for a specific purpose. A better specific purpose with that particular topic might be to inform my audience about the history of Mexico's Dia de los Muertos celebration. Avoid figurative language. So in this potential specific purpose, we say to persuade my audience that the campus policy on student parking really stinks. That's that figurative language. It stinks. Now, because this particular terminology is rather subjective and people may not necessarily know exactly what you mean when you say that the parking stinks. They may interpret that as there's a foul odor, or some might think, oh, it's just really bad parking. To make this statement better, this potential specific purpose statement better, we might suggest that you say to persuade my audience that the campus policy on student parking should be revised to provide more spaces for students before 5 p.m. Now, as someone who has attended multiple institutions, I know that this is a problem for many institutions, whereas student parking is very poor prior to 5 o'clock because most of the parking is for faculty members, at least most of the convenient parking. So this might be a good topic, actually. All right, you also want to make sure that your specific purpose is one distinct idea rather than multiple ideas. So an ineffective example is to persuade my audience to become literacy tutors and to donate time to Meals on Wheels. You have an extra goal there. You don't want to confuse people or split your audience. The individuals that might be interested in literacy tutoring might not have any interest in civic engagement. Just because someone is a scholar and they're in school, they might be focused completely on academia, and they might want to focus all of their time on either working or studying and not really care too much about doing community service if it's not a requirement for graduation. So in your presentation, make sure you have one focus. Try not to split your audience. Try not to have too many goals in your presentation. Your primary goal should either be to persuade your audience to become literacy tutors or to persuade your audience to donate time to Meals on Wheels. Avoid being vague. Now, gerrymandering is a term that I imagine many of you guys know, but there's the potential that some of you guys aren't sure exactly what gerrymandering is. So in order to keep this statement from being too vague, a better example might be to persuade your audience that each state, keyword state, should create a nonpartisan commission. Nonpartisan. That's another keyword, an unbiased. You could change it to unbiased, so most people know what bias is. So each state should create an unbiased commission to establish criteria for congressional redistricting. That might be a better specific purpose. Checklist. Now that we've talked about all the things that we do not want in our specific purpose and given examples of things that might be ideal for a specific purpose, let's make sure that we have a good understanding of what should be in the specific purpose. Ask yourself these questions. Remember, I'm question oriented. Does this particular presentation meet the assignment requirements? One, if I give you an informative presentation assignment, I don't want you to talk about something persuasive in nature. Two, can this be accomplished in the time allotted? Can you really talk about a very complex idea that has the requirement of several definitions and examples and illustrations in 3 to 5 minutes? Probably not. So you might want to consider the amount of time that you have for your presentation. Is this relevant to my audience? I'll probably not talk to you guys about ACTs because you guys are already in college. Now, for some of you, it might be relevant to know about ACTs simply because some scholarships require a certain score on ACT. So maybe if you're going to a four-year institution and you're trying to get a particular scholarship, you may invest in taking the ACT again. But for most of you, you would not be interested in hearing anything about an ACT or a SAT. So make sure the topic is relevant to your audience. Try not to make it too trivial. Try not to talk about something that's like common knowledge or something that most people already are familiar with. Make sure that the topic is something that the audience feels they can gain something from, that they're learning something and it's going to be valuable for them. Also, try to make sure that the topic is not too technical for your audience. If you have to bore your audience with definitions after every other word, then the topic is probably too technical and you probably need to reconsider that. All right, the last thing, okay, that was general purpose, specific purpose, and the third thing before the actual introduction of your speech is your central idea, which is also known as a thesis statement. I'm sure that all of you guys are familiar with thesis statements because you guys have all written essays before, but basically it's a one-sentence statement that includes your main points. So beyond your specific purpose, you want to talk about what are your main points of your presentation. This is going to more than likely be included in your introduction because in your introduction, you want to preview the main points that you're elaborating in the body of your speech and that you're re-emphasizing in your conclusion. So your central idea is basically a thesis statement that includes your main ideas for your speech. Here's an example of the three. A general purpose might be to inform. My specific purpose might be to inform my audience of the three major races in alpine skiing. My central idea would expound on that by including my main points that the three major races in alpine skiing are the downhill slalom and giant slalom. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to reach out via email or phone. Have a great week.